and welcome to today's video. In today's video, we'll be discussing the dangers of living in a hyper-individualistic society such as the one we live in currently. Hyper-individualism has now led to many negative effects we are now seeing play out on the minds of millions of people. Every society has some sort of framework. However, in recent years, we've transitioned from an objective societal framework to now a subjective societal framework. In a subjective society, the individual's happiness is the driving force behind the culture, which ultimately leads to hyper-individualism. The framework of hyper-individualism is a societal framework where everything is about one's self-gratification by any means necessary. Essentially, you gotta do what you gotta do to get the most notoriety, clout, fame, money, status, and resources. This isn't to say that striving to be the best and looking out for yourself isn't important, but when a society and a culture all has the same mindset of looking out for themselves, that causes a lot of problems. Today, we'll examine how society has changed over time and explore the consequences of hyper-individualism. So no further ado, sit back, relax, and let's talk about this. Before I can explain to you guys how exactly we got to hyper-individualism, I'm going to take you guys through the steps that were taken by the elites in order to get us to where we are currently. So first, I'm going to talk about the cultural framework in the 1900s. Then I'm going to talk about the transition to subjectivity. Then I'm going to talk about the long-term dangers of hyper-individualism. Next, we'll talk about ways to stop hyper-individualism. And then lastly, I'll wrap everything up with a conclusion on what we can do about this. The cultural framework of the 1900s. The cultural framework of the 1900s was primarily objective. It emphasized group integrity, righteousness, and moral principles. The backbone of this society was based on trust, and everyone did the right thing to maintain mutual trust. For example, people in the early 1900s trusted their neighbors to watch over their children and take care of their homes while they were away. Doors were left unlocked, and children walked home from school by themselves. This trust was the result of the moral and ethical principles that their society upheld. The transition to a subjective societal framework. It started with radio broadcasting in the 1920s. Radio? Yes, radio was the first introduction to influential audio media on the masses in the US. While the 1920s programming was not as outwardly immoral as it is today, it paved the foundation for the masses to trust and feel comfortable with the media. With this comfortability and trust established by the radio in the 20s, the elites saw the opportunity to further their programming on the masses around the 1960s. Society's framework began to shift from objectivity to subjectivity. The emphasis switched to individualism, and people began to focus more on gaining personal fame, money, and power. In addition to this, they now not only heard about the success of little nobodies making something out of themselves and becoming bigger than life somebodies in Hollywood, but they saw it on magazines, TVs, and on billboards, further polluting the minds of the aspiring masses that they could become the next Marilyn Monroe, the Beatles, or Elvis Presley. It was this mindset that caused a transition in our cultural values and backbone from objective to now about one's self-gratification, leading to hyper-individualism, what we see now, where everyone's priority was their personal gain, beating out their fellow man for a coveted position at work and the chance to increase clout and material possessions. In a hyper-individualistic society, people are more concerned with their careers and personal pursuits, and that the ends justify the means. This shift in hyper-individualism is what we now see in the United States. And with such a diverse culture in this country, we are now seeing polarizing extremes. For example, when it comes to gender dynamics and interactions with the opposite sex, we're seeing on one side incels who are reclusive and virgins, and on the other side, the Godzilla alpha digital pimp who is social and sleeps around with more women than he has time for. And then we have the floaters in between who consume content on or about these two polarizing extremes. The long-term dangers of hyper-individualism. Hyper-individualistic society has long-term dangers that we need to pay attention to. The first danger is a lack of trust in others, resulting in increased government oversight, fewer freedoms, and less liberty. It also leads to the belief that the government should take care of its citizens, because as individuals in society who are hyper-individualistic, we can't trust each other and therefore we are not reliable. Secondly, there's a loss of communal values, social isolation, and loneliness that leads to mental health issues. This social isolation and destruction of loss of community was also enhanced by the you know what I'm saying. Environments that prioritize personal gain above all else create a competitive rather than a cooperative community. Now, there's nothing wrong with competition, and I'm not saying we all need to cooperate in the Marxist/communist sense, but I'm saying that because the backbone and framework of the society is based on integrity, righteousness, and moral principles, it is much easier for people to trust one another, because you trust me to do the right thing, and on the reverse, I trust you to do the right thing, based on our structure of truth, integrity, and righteousness that our society was founded upon. This societal structure creates freedom and liberty because we can all trust each other based on a moral code of ethics that the group lives by. This is exactly what made the United States so successful in the first place. The country was founded with the belief in God as our guiding force. And before you try to come at me for spewing my religious thought, even if you don't personally believe in a higher power, it is crucial to recognize that without any belief in something greater than ourselves, we are essentially no different than animals in need of guidance. Unfortunately, there are those in power who claim to have our best interests at heart, and maybe they do. But we are imperfect humans, so therefore, if we put these men in positions of power to be shepherds over the masses of sheep, or the rest of us as people, they're going to make decisions that benefit themselves and their families first and foremost before the needs of our own. Because through the elimination of a belief in a God, they therefore step into that position and fill the shoes of a God on this earth to rule over us. And they believe that we can actually get to this perfect utopian paradise when it's actually communism and totalitarianism. And the real danger with the hyper-individualism that they've pushed on us through the media is the fact that we won't be able to unite as a people because of all the infighting and us not being able to trust our neighbor, etc. We're going to turn on each other instead of looking up and seeing what the real issue is and the root of the problem and who's pulling the strings. We're just playing puppet for them. So what are the best ways that we can stop the hyper-individualistic societal structure we live in? Or at least try to slow it down. It's essential to address hyper-individualism before it becomes an even more prevalent issue in society. One way we can prevent hyper-individualism is proper moral education, teaching the importance of community values, principles, and about the scriptures in relation to fundamental building blocks to a morally sound society. Second, we should promote civic engagement online and in person to encourage people to come together and support the values and beliefs we agree with. Finally, we can limit our media intake and only watch or support content that promotes righteousness and truth. If you're going to take away anything that I've said from this video, I would like you to take away this. It's the fact that hyper-individualism leads to a loss of trust in society, the decline in civic values, and ultimately an increase in government oversight. And although it may seem like it's too late, the society cultural framework has changed significantly from the last century, and we still need to address hyper-individualism to prevent future dangers. And in my opinion, the best way to do this is by educating people on the importance of community values, promoting civic engagement, and limiting our media intake so we're mainly watching and supporting content that promotes righteousness and truth. And through implementing these things, we can prevent the further spread of hyper-individualism, leading to a happier, more honest, and more compassionate society. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you guys so much. It means so much to me that you guys have watched this content, consumed it, because I really think that it starts with us watching stuff like this to become passionate about it and then want to make a change. And we can definitely do that as a younger generation coming up. I believe in us, and I believe that we are turning around and we can make a change, or at least we can advocate for it and make people more aware of what's going on around us. If you enjoy content like this and you want to spread this to more young guys, more young women around the world, be sure to drop a like, hit that share button, share this on as many platforms as you can. Hit that subscribe button if you're new and you want to join the family, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a blessed rest of your day. Stay safe, guys.